And a lot of what we developed in that experience was commissioning and supporting new work. So I spent a lot of time both talking with artists, especially younger people who were really still developing their work, and then producing work. So we were supporting them also in a kind of production and process. Sometimes in different sites in the city. I was in Utrecht, which is a small city in the Netherlands, 250,000 people. But other times there were pieces were being made around the world and being brought to Utrecht. What struck me really then was that most of the artists I was talking to said, it's great, I trained in this or I did this training, but now I'm actually learning how to be an artist. And it was that huge gap between the training they'd had and received. And this is not just in the States or in Europe, but around the world. We work with artists from India, from Brazil, from South Africa, from North Africa, from Scandinavia. The stories were very similar. Those that I found had really developed their own, really, for me, interesting individual practice were those who would tend to be autodidact. They sort of self-devised a training course of doing workshops here, often doing an academic subject at the university, but countering that with a physical practice with artists that they were drawn to. These became the people who I thought were actually finding their own route, and in many cases actually evolving and developing the form ahead of the field. So I started to get involved there's an MA in choreography run at the theatre school in Amsterdam. And I started just to be involved in that on a purely practical level. I would go to the studio every 2 weeks or so and just work with the students really on the principles they were applying, the content they were bringing to the work, how they were exploring it. Really just asking them questions, just pushing. And that got me very interested in this whole notion of dance pedagogy and the kind of education system that had been set up. And we've heard some of the reasons why or how dance training courses got set up. But I feel what was kind of really important was looking at how I saw the field was shifting, and many of these artists were really questioning a lot of the principles by which dance was traditionally shown. They were not looking for the repertory company that would hire them. They were not looking for the theatre that had 400 seats with amazing technical facilities. That was the only place where that could possibly stage their vision. They were people who were looking in all kinds of contexts, and that was increasingly the kind of work that I was presenting at Spring Dance. Work that really engaged people in very different ways and came from a whole set of different principles. And when Arizona State University asked me if I was interested in applying for this position, I called them and said, I don't have a master's, I haven't trained in dance, but I think dance education has to basically completely change. And they said, "Oh, that's interesting." So then I had the long panel interview by phone. I was in Utrecht trying to listen to these 8 people in a room. But finally I got there and kind of had 2 days to really talk about why I felt everything had to change. And they had a great dean there who was really interested in how could dance kind of reposition itself, and took the risk in a way to hire me. I'd never worked in a university before. I had the Amsterdam experience, but I took on the principal idea that we needed to really look at how dance could now be engaged in a multiple of ways, and that people who were involved in that field needed to have a broad set of skills that the traditional, narrow, focused, I hate the word training, but the programs in which, when I got to Arizona, you could still choose in your second year whether you were going to choreograph dance, do dance studies, or be an educator. And I said, this is, you're separating away all the skills that those individuals will need when they graduate, and creating this terrible hierarchy amongst the students about who was the maker and who was going to be the writer. So we got rid of all of those tracks, and we created one program that was essentially about creating a creative practitioner. And I think that's, there's nuances of difference here in terms of what we're producing. But I felt if we're really going to enable people to engage with the field in a way that we cannot really know, because the future will be made by those students, not by us, we need to give them the breadth of skills that they can draw on when they graduate, in order that they can be an active participant in evolving the future of the field, as opposed to being someone who needs to wait for the existing infrastructure to recognize their specific talent and say, oh, here's a slot for you, which, in a sense is, again, a reductive way of talking about the old repertory system. But I think it was always about, training lots of people, and I guess this comes from the kind of classical ballet tradition of, you start them young and you train them, and the very few who manage to get to the end are the ones who we can then employ. It's designed to ensure that there is attrition of people for whom there is no future in that classical practice. And that I felt was a complete waste of both time, money, but really human aspiration. How could we work with the diversity of practice that everyone could bring to the field, and enable them to be the ones that really take it in directions that we're not in any way shaping or predicting, but they are making for themselves. So that's really what we set up in Arizona. We can talk in more detail if there's time. But essentially, my question was, why was dance education failing the profession, and how could we turn it around so that it could start to create a practice that, we can only imagine, we can only dream about.
One of the questions that's sort of synthesized here is, are these programs are they training art makers? Are they is it about developing an environment in which it could do something like you observed people doing autodidactically out in the world? Is that the aspiration, or is it more traditionally giving skills that maybe then they go out in the world and still find that vision? Is it possible for a university program? Robert Irwin, a visual artist, said that he would take his students. He was very resistant to teaching, but he would essentially experimentally lead his students through all of art history and then kind of shove them off the cliff. And they would sort of answer all the problems that had happened and then sort of say what needs to happen. But I don't think it sounds like it was not a given in a lot of our educations that what you were in school for was to say where can this form go. So I'm curious as to whether that is what you're teaching.
Yes. I mean, I have a feeling with kind of all answers. Yes, that would definitely be a goal. That's why I'm saying, because I don't want any aesthetic imperatives. I don't, no imperatives. This is what it has to be. This is what dance is, or what a body can do, or what your body should do, or be trying to do, any of that. But then they're still leading them through the equivalent of leading them through some histories in order for them to have that background from which to launch and ask questions and engage in discourse. I would say that it didn't resonate with me. Am I making it? Are we educating rather than training dancers or choreographers or educators, or we're just engaging people with the field, and then what they do with that engagement. Of course, then this is away from, to throw a thorn in, from the requirements of outcomes assessment that we have to do. But assuming that we can successfully subvert that system and through subterfuge and various means to not do the outcomes assessment or the outcome is that they might do anything with it, right?
I mean, I think it's really complicated to, I mean, I think that's a beautiful utopian vision, to have the autodidactic student in the room together with the one who wants to join a dance company, whatever dance company is out there. But the reality, for example, for us at Hunter College, is that we live under a system that decides and defines what kinds of monies and resource we can access, and we are constantly evaluated. Not only I'm evaluated every semester by some professor who doesn't even know what dance is, or has never seen a dance concert, but also we are evaluated by outside evaluators who come in, and we had evaluators who came in who were from a very specific tradition of forms, etc. So they're looking at my class and they're wondering, you should be in jail or whatever. You shouldn't be here. But anyways, you know, how is it that you subvert the system and you convince the science people in the committees to hire Simon and not hire the ballet teacher? I mean, that's, I think, what we're dealing with, really, is how do we create a faculty that understands the kind of struggle we're all in, and so how do we articulate our thoughts to the rest of the university, because we are isolated. That's my feeling. Both at Princeton, which I feel like we're kind of a playground for kids who don't want to be nuclear scientists, then they come over and they play with us. And we're told to kind of go easy on them. I mean, obviously, if I said this, I would be fired, but I mean, basically, that there is a feeling that the arts are not as important as the science. Yeah. Anyways, I've lost my job already. If anyone wants to apply, there's an open position.
It pays very well, too. I just wanted to pull out this idea of research, actually. I think this is a way to game the system. That it's not so much the dance making or the physical training, but it's this kind of, especially in a liberal arts environment, for me it's about trying to introduce to my students this idea and to introduce this, you know, how to make this really an intrinsic practice for you, right? That you are going to move yourself forward through this because you are interested in research that's about you, your body, your practice, your creative process. And that entrance into this is something actually that the larger system of the academy can maybe come to start to understand as relevant. Because of the notion of outcomes or achievement or whatever those things are, I think it's new to my students, this idea of not being told exactly what to do in a technique class, right? That I'm not going to show you and then you repeat back to me what I do necessarily all the time. That part of what we have to do is a kind of investigation, right? And that I don't know their body, I don't know their experience, so I can't tell them exactly how to get there. But also within my own time in CUNY, there's a shift in, at Hunter College, where it's gone from being a teaching college, where the focus was on the teaching, right? You as a faculty member, you're going to teach a lot of classes, and as it becomes a research-oriented institution, that there's more support for that, right? And so there's an expectation for the faculty. No. There is an expectation for full-time faculty who are trying to make tenure to do research, and creative work is understood to be research even if they don't understand it. And you're told, there's a tenure and promotion workshop, we're going to tell you this is what you need to do, right? You need to get this many articles done, you've got to publish this, and if you're in the arts, you do your creative work, and we have no guidelines for that. And that's actually kind of fine to work your way through, but at least they're saying this is important to do. And so if that's the shift in the structure, how do we get our students to also realize that that is a valuable practice for them and that it's rewarded, in a kind of external way? So for me, it's this idea that when we have in our BA, the focus is everyone who's going to be a dance major will choreograph. And that is the heart, that's what I came to understand was the heart of this program. A lot of our time and resources go towards the students' work, and it's uncredited time as a faculty member, so on and so forth. But it's important. It's the point of it, because that particular process of making isn't necessarily to just pump out more choreographers, but is because the effort of doing that kind of investigation and creative work and managing of people, managing of time, self-reflection, developing questions, it's inquiry, and that process is relevant to a life. It's relevant to the field of art practice, but it's really relevant, hopefully, to a life. And we have the kinds of students who may not have come in with enough of that, nice middle-class ballet training to then go join the 3 companies that will pay you a living wage. So they're going to either join a particular community of engagement, or they're going to have dance be a part of their life, but not be a professional practice in that way. So there's a word, translatable skills. Something like, that process of investigation, I think, is essential, and for me that becomes relevant all over the place, because I think that's what we're part of what we're asking to do all over. So, there's a little sort of starting to find a way to translate that to a dean, to a provost, to curriculum committees. That what these students are doing in the studio is research equal to another laboratory space, and so that's sort of like one of my kind of.
But can I just respond? Because it's clearly true. We need to find arguments in order that the programs that do exist continue and they grow. But I think the issue is much bigger than the survival of any one of our individual programs. The issue for me is that there's never been a golden age. When people say, why do you want to change it? It works well. I say it's never worked well. Dance has always been a minority in terms of audiences. And if you look even in the US, the National Endowment for the Arts figures for audiences for dance since '92 is declining. It's now the last survey of what they call people's participation in the arts, which is not participation, they mean audiences, was 2008. It's 8.1% of the US population attended a dance performance. Now, that's okay, that's 18 plus million people, it's a lot of people, but what it means is 91.1% are not attending dance performances. And I think what we need to be engaged in is how do we create a way in which dance becomes something much more vital to the majority of the population, and that the people we graduate have the skills, the ambition, the intuition, the capability of fostering that growth. So all the models we talk about, there's a decline in repertory companies, or the ballet companies are shrinking too, and what are we going to do about it? That's a context that we need to take in mind, but that's not the problem. The problem is that we don't have the imagination to think that dance can be something much more and much more important to people than it ever has been. And that's what I think is the issue. And how do we enable that to be facilitated by the very programs that now exist and those that we need to become?
But what about, for example, the You Think You Can Dance programs? No, I'm serious. You Think You Can Dance. That has that
pop culture dance.
Popularized dance, and how come that's not translating into any kind of audience?
Because it prepares people for exactly the wrong expectations of what dance can be.
No, I'm talking about the
It's
viewership.
incredibly narrowing in terms of what dance is, right down to a very it's like sport. It's what skill can you display? And is one skill better than another? And then it's about winners, and it's
I'm not discussing so much the value of those things,
no,
but
I'm saying it doesn't engage people with thinking what dance can be, and therefore it doesn't actually help us.
Right, but I'm saying it did develop an audience for dance. So,
No.
no, that's what everybody says, that
Develops
there's
an
many
audience for a
more.
very particular kind of skill display, which is not what dance is. Dance is this vast possibility. And so you think you can dance is this little narrow sliver.
Yeah, I'm not discussing the value of you think you can dance. I'm just saying, I think that there has been more, no, that's not what I said. All I'm saying is that when you start talking about creating, how can we be more imaginative, more intelligent in making dance a bigger thing than it is, I wonder what that means in terms of the people who went and did You Think You Can Dance. They were thinking, let's use our skills and make this a way to popularize, even if I've never watched it, but even if it's not my aesthetic or not my political, etc. inclination. But so what is it that we're talking about?
I mean, we've been trying some things to varying degrees of success, but the studio seminar model. So in thinking also of like to increase dance viewership, even in that question, I think there's like when I'm thinking of trying to recruit new students for our program, because we need to, or our course of allotments will go lower and lower and lower. But there's, there is sort of like seducing and converting the students who already show up on our radar, and we show up on their radar because they like dance, and our program is called the dance concentration, so it shows up on the radar, so they're already in it. But then there's also like getting students at this undergraduate college who never thought that they might be interested in continuing dancing or starting dancing or engaging in this way. And at first it was thought, the way to do this are these practice courses for non-majors, so-called. And that doesn't seem to do anything, actually, for us. It does, it's another exercise course, in a sense.
Yeah. They don't join the dance program.
But we do have these studio seminar courses in our inter-arts curriculum. And a wonderful guy, Robert Sember, teaches a course, Vogology. And actually, it's bringing people down from the house community, and is also looking at public health issues and race and ethnicity and gender issues. It's like how it intersects with these other concerns of students, and that's doing something. Another course.
When you say that's doing something,
what I mean is that students are starting to come in and starting to think. Some of those students are then continuing to take more courses. In the dance program, or this part of the inter-arts program that intersects with dance. So that's what and it's also, and they become friends with the dance students, so it also starts opening their minds, because they know more people with more diverse interests from more diverse worlds. So that's that sort of a course. What?
We have an audience question.
It's more of a comment. That is because I work in the field of K-12.
Louder, please.
I work in the field of K-12 dance education. And it just, what I'm hearing sounds like looking at that level of dance exploration is important as well, because in public schools in New York City, it's the same proportion of, dance programs within 1,000 schools or 1,200 schools, whatever it is. The smallest percentage of arts experience for students is in dance. Many students get music, visual arts, some theater. Dance doesn't usually have words associated with it, and language, spoken language, and that has a lot to do with that. But there's a parallel here in opening very young people's minds to what is dance.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I hear in the voguing course is this kind of way to introduce the value of embodied knowledge and linking it through these other academic disciplines, such that you can see in the conservatory model, which did produce all this knowledge through physicality and values that. And one of the things that I wondered, Simon, is if you were saying that dance pedagogy had to be essentially a unique endeavor, and how this fits into, one of the discomforts for faculty thinking about how to justify our research is like how does this fit into the paradigm of academic departments? And so I think that's exactly the same struggle, and some of what maybe dance studies is doing is starting to put critical discourse around the value of what we all know has tremendous value and knowledge, but without it sort of making the pass back and forth between the practice of it and articulating it in language that can't get dollars, can't get time, can't get students.
Just to piggyback on the numbers you mentioned about audience, I remember you bringing that up in your interview with Alyssa, and you pointed out that actually those numbers only reflect specific conventional venues, and you pointed towards the ways in which contemporary artists are showing work in sort of a multiplicity of other kinds of spaces on the internet or public space, etc. And I'm wondering if that's sort of what you're talking about in terms of really looking at the field and what it's doing, extraneous to like what we've already recognized and shown here.
No, and it's already happening, but I'm also projecting ahead. If essentially what's great about an embodied practice is the connectiveness, the connection you can have when it's a live experience. And I think increasingly people are looking less and less to having the big, spectacular, more sedentary relationship to dance, and something that's much more participatory and active. And I don't think that's going to happen in big spaces. That's going to happen in social settings, could be healthcare settings, in educational contexts, and they're certainly driven by an agenda of content, but still about creative work, led by artists, with artists applying all of their imagination to the way they see that issue in relation to the world. And I think that's a really, as someone who's spent their life curating performance, that's really what drives me, is the fact that artists can give us a unique way of thinking about, engaging with the world we inhabit. And increasingly, artists are finding other platforms to work in. Some of them are technological, but I think increasingly the sort of social framework of dance making is going to become something that will increasingly gain people's interest and attention, and that may be the context where we start to blow away this idea that dance is a minority interest. And I'm not meaning an artist running classes, I'm saying a creative practice in a social context. I think that will grow. It's already, there's the big conversation about the ways in which dance artists are being invited into other institutions, whether they be galleries or museums, because there's a sort of unique physical engagement with the idea and an embodied practice that is really powerful and communicative. And I think if we're going to think of dance artists in those sort of contexts, there's a whole new set of skills they need. Not just pedagogy, but the kind of interpersonal skills and engagement with what the world is, and not just what dance history is. A knowledge of their own place in society, a knowledge of who their neighbors are, where all that stuff, which is huge. But I think those are the things, those are the connected strands that we need to be connecting to our students, and not just feeling we need to give them a broader dance world experience, because that's already far too narrow.
What I'm hearing is the ability to engage in discourse, like as a skill. Like that's
all practice, but I mean that communication can be physical.
Well, I'm definitely defining discourse very broadly. I mean, to engage in discourse, it could be without words. And I don't want to introduce one more phrase into the conversation because it's been useful to me in sort of like this defense or question of dance's research, and that's the phrase "thinking through the medium." That artists think through the medium, and when we put words to it, that's already another medium. Where no matter what the field, this idea is that we think, and it is a thinking, And to think and to receive this thinking, there's some engagement with the medium that has to occur, whether it's painting or color or shape or whatever it is, you know. So somehow that becomes useful in this, like, also the bifurcations, that, like, it's all thinking. It isn't like this is thinking and that's not thinking. This is thinking and that's body. But it's like this, there's a lot of thinking going on. It's not like choreographers in a studio are not, there isn't a lot of thought happening. There is, and theory.
I think you also tapped into something about, and you brought this up in the previous discussion, but the interdisciplinary. So when you talk about this voguing course, and you talk about the multiple intersection points, the way in which it's going to cross, you know, into different departments and fields of study, that, to me, that's where I am. It feels like a very challenging thing, but I'm going back to a previous DTW lobby talk about the relevance of the university, and one of our conclusions was, if we don't get into disciplinary, we are going to just shrivel, because the conversation has to be relevant both to us as dancers, right, and artists, and to other people. There's something about taking something like voguing and saying, one, it's worthy of studying in the academy, but then also look at all the ways in which a physical practice matters to, you know, on levels of culture, race, gender, you know, access, money. You know, it's so clearly a great way of coming into a really relevant conversation. And there's so many practices and places where dance happens where that's very real. So for me, that's one of those things that we struggle with, which is a lot of our students come from a really lively dance practice. It's just not, you know, it just doesn't usually happen on the floor without shoes on.
Yeah.
And so how do we start to acknowledge and find a way to bring those things together into conversation with one another, and then into conversation with social scientists, with a chemist, or, you know, how do those things become a discussion with neurologists, because there's so much information that we could actually be engaging in, and I think it becomes a broader conversation, and it is one that brings us into rooms together and into bodies.
Yes, hi, I'm Berta. I was just thinking, in terms of audience reception, is one concern, but then in terms of curriculum, I was just in a conference on dancing the African diaspora.
Thank you.
And one of these questions in this conference on dancing the African diaspora was the notion of curriculum, and how African diaspora courses couldn't just be like one jazz course, one hip hop course, and that's it, right? It had to be like a build-up understanding of how these practices, these social dances, are about like the transmission of embodied knowledge of history, gender, race, theory, and all these things. So I think I can see the concern with audience reception and how these TV shows don't build dance spectatorship that is a culture. But on the other hand, I mean, this social dance is just extremely active. I mean, if you go to the classes on salsa, most of the population is white. All these white females that are rediscovering their gender and their race, and, you know, and you talk to them and they are like, well, you know, in my culture there is no forum to discuss these questions of race and gender and sexuality as I can experience them in my dance of salsa classes, right? So I think at the level of curriculum, it's a big challenge, you know, for you guys. But I guess in talking about these diasporic minority social dances and how they are actually central to, because see, I was teaching also in a college in which the dance class was part of the physical education, and the classic and modern was very small. When you talk to the tap and the African dance classes, it was like massive, right? And then I was bringing people to teach Rumba and Afro-Cuban dance, and I had like, it was so huge. So, and we were theorizing too. So I guess, well, just how you create a curriculum and deal with a system, that's always like, but again, talking about
embodiment not only through a Western perspective, right? And like the
absolutely.
body and the mind just through the West, but just talking about social dance as active and theoretically engaging as any other practice.
And I think to have our students understand that and write about it too, especially
But they
like.
do. The students understand.
They do, but I'm saying to develop the idea of research as that being a very valid subject for research, so that we don't continue the track separation that exists in these dance departments in a kind of intellectual, ideological thinking, that there is ways in which these practices will eventually inform the field, and they will be.
And have historically informed the field for a
Right.
long
Well,
time.
they have
having
in a very
yeah.
invisibilized way, and so
Exactly.
how to really sort of make it, I think it's happening more and more.
Especially social dance. I mean, you go to the classes and it's just like, it's so much dance. I mean,
Well, I mean, if we as dance programs keep perpetuating the symphonic model of concert dance concert presentation as
the authority.
as the model, we are missing most of where dance happens.
I just, wait, let her ask the question. She doesn't.
Okay, so what is worrying me a bit here is actually the technique. And why I'm saying this is exactly because all of you had very, very good technical training in one thing or another, but very, very serious, pretty much told what to do, technical training, which supports your body now and your ideas in dance. And so, although I'm very certainly dancers who dance are not stupid or should be considered stupid, and if they're going to university, I assume they are looking for an education. And so much material, so little time. I mean, the idea of history of dance from the beginning, just so you know it. I mean, even if you just do a line this and then that, because a lot of people don't know about that. And then again, like the physical kinesiology, and especially, and you were talking about people who sort of came from their own world, maybe self-put together, I would say, knowledge. And so I think it's so important for dancers to know about art, about film, to connect, to know about anthropology, to know about sociology, to, you know, even if they're doing ballet, to definitely know about other places in the world and other ways of attracting dance. So what I'm wondering is actually, I guess I'm saying, should people go to university later? That's what I'm wondering.
Yes. I think so.
Yes.
And also, I think the big problem, which is also the great support, is that it, like you said, it takes so long to master something. But what about, I think in hearing you speak, Simon, about new locations, and then I'm thinking about the K through 12, and I'm thinking about, what about a piece of this pie that changes, so the doing of it, the absolute rigor of mastering something, the doors are open. So instead of having, okay, I'm going to get my BFA, I'm going to be at SUNY Brockport for 4 years, and in the summers I'm going to go to this festival, that festival. What about, and I know that there's been attempts and it's happening, but is it really happening? I don't really think it's happening. I'm not seeing it happen. There's a separation. So social, we're not social. We're not social.
What do you mean we're not social?
We are very self-focused on mastering something, whether it is, you know, a really intelligent somatic practice. I mean, the practice oftentimes can be sort of not singular, but there has to be some sort of focus. And I'm not social when I'm in that mode at all. I'm socializing with myself, but I'm not and maybe I'm socializing with your cells, but I'm not going out to elementary school and socializing with their cells. So I'm just thinking and dreaming out loud here, what if, somehow in this meeting right now, we're talking about this, what if, and it's been done, I know, but it's not really being done, because if it were being done, the population that was going to see dance would be huge.
So what if?
Because
Tell us.
finding a way, or maybe just having the possibility in this room of opening the doors a little bit more. Instead of waiting later to go to college, what about allowing another level or another exchange of experience to be part of it? Not all of it, because you have to have that time to understand, like you said, dance history or social dance. If you're, maybe you come in and you get your emphasis in social dance. You have to social dance a certain amount to really gain that expertise, I believe,
Those are like historical traditions. I mean, social dance is not like something you learn in a year.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But I
But
think,
I'm just
And the research.
No, I'm not saying you're going to learn it in a year. I'm just saying that part of the challenge is that it takes so long to learn or to master something. And so we're saying, well, no one's coming, Well, because we're somewhat closing off, and I think the when and the how and the where, it can't be, I don't think it can be 100% changed all the time, but maybe at the level of the educational system from K through PhD, there's some new invitation of, more population, more social.
no, I just want to unpack your notion of technique, because for me, technique has to be about the skills that you're able to embody that are fit for what you want to apply them to. So I think what you're talking about is a very particular kind of physical virtuosity, which is important. But what we're talking about is something broader than that, where someone who is able to use their body in a creative and expressive way is able to connect that to the broad contexts that they will find themselves working in. And that is changing our notion of what technique is, and it's changing our notion of what kinds of people are graduating from these kind of programs. And it's not to say, it's not to say that great dancing is not important. I completely agree it is, and I think even more so when you're applying your skills in so many different contexts, you need an incredible understanding of what your body is capable of, and the nuances of how that expresses ideas to people. So I think we're asking to think of technique as something that is both mental and physical. It's a complete embodied practice that enables you to engage, as a dancer in these what are emerging as new contexts for practice. And I think that's the way we start to see different kinds of students coming into the programs and us getting dance into a much broader set of contexts. So dance does become something that people want to do. There's clearly ways in which you can earn a living from it, and it becomes just much more crucial in terms of everyday culture.
Sorry.
Phyllis, go.
Phyllis is got her hand up. My mouth, right? A couple of things. Okay, I'll stand up. I'm a woman of experience, and I travel worldwide. I'm creative and happy. I have a sense of humor. I'm an adjunct at the New York University, Tisch School of the Arts, by choice, because I have a professional life. And I cannot be consumed by the discipline of being a full-time teacher. But I'd like to say a couple of things. One is that within the context of a university, dance people are not active enough. I have spent all my life, now I want to tell you that my motto is we have taken 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. And I've been around a long time to watch that happen. First of all, you talk about the politics of the university. Have you knocked at the president's door? Have you screamed at the dean? Have you sent your students there to action? I'm an activist. I feel that intellectual conversation is extremely stimulating, especially with a scotch. And I just feel that you have to be proactive and get everybody to abide and know that dance does exist. They do know that. I'll say one interesting thing, that I happened to be in the elevator alone with the president of New York University.
Yes.
Now, I said, how do you do? And he said, how do you do? And I introduced myself and I said, I'm in the dance department. And he says, oh. I said, have you ever been to a dance concert? Now, NYU today is different from your time because we have 12, 14 creative productions going on. The students are very creative. So I said to him, have you ever been to any dance concert? And he said, no, but my daughter has.
Oh.
Well, I went home and went under the bed and said to my husband, forget it, I'm not getting out. I was so depressed. And that to me was a symbol of what we have to deal with in this country. The other thing about you need to have better statistics on your comments. Your comments are great, but they're personal. They're not statistically accurate. So I want to go there. I want to just say one other thing about the Board of Education. After many, 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 many years, I was finally asked to come in to teach at the teachers of the Board of Education. And those teachers, who are wonderful, TAs they call them, yeah, and they are wonderful, they are dedicated, they are brilliant. So what happens is that I say to them, okay, they want a technique class. Well, you know. So I said, okay, let's move the head forward and go across the floor. They couldn't even move their heads, they were so tense. I said, okay, let's move your chest forward. They couldn't even move their chest. I said, do their head and their chest, maybe it'll connect. Well, it turned out that because the restrictions upon their individuality and personal creativity are so profound and so, it's just hard. They have the right. So I'm just telling you, it's rough. The third thing now is what I want to say. So in terms of the politics of this country, the money is major. One of the things that dance is going down and changing is because of the lack of money, and the bookers are being very strange, and et cetera. And the new ideas are really wonderful, but they're not new. They're late. You're late. You're too late. You're too old to be so late in your thinking. So I feel that motion is the engine for creative thinking, acting, and being, for everything. That in the time of mind-body research, it is always very interesting to me that when a scientist, a neuroscientist writes a book, they only put the head on the cover. They always leave out the body. So we have a very major disconnect in our society, whether we even get to dance between the mind and body. So that's all I'll say. It's just three areas, you know, the political, the educational, and the fact that my 15 MFAs at NYU are so thrilled that they're being ripped apart to become who they are. That's all I can say.
Why is it that the dance department has very little to do with, say, the performance studies department?
Oh, well.
Are there ways in which
I go all the time. You know, I try to go to anything that performance study does. And also they have a big conference.
In terms of like education and like.
Well, what about, we are happy to do it. And, but performance studies, you know, we have a big conference every year with performance studies over at Tisch, et cetera. Advocate for them. Really. You know. So anyway, that's it.
Do your MFAs have an idea of where they're headed?
My MFAs.
Yeah, what?
All right, I'm going to,
Tell us about what you hear them saying, like, I really want to do this, I want to do that, I'm interested.
No,
Or
they don't say
currently,
that.
what are they currently doing
What do they
besides
say?
earning their MFA? I'm just
They're
curious
not-
about
what
who they are,
They're from all over the world.
but who they are as individuals in the program.
What they want to do, I think, is to be themselves, to understand their own weight, their own time, their own place. This is the major thing, because they've gone through the years of education, and they need to reevaluate their skin and realize the human element. They need to understand sentient values are major in the teaching of technique everywhere. Qualitative technical teaching and sentient responses are never taught within the concept of a technical process. Right away, that's a lost cause for a lot of the things that you're saying. If you understand what I'm saying, I don't know. You don't understand?
I didn't understand.
Okay.
You're saying
Yeah,
it's a
say
lot.
that again. I think this is really important,
It is
actually,
important.
because I think we can use words and we still don't understand what
Okay.
someone has
Because
said.
my words are words that come from emotion. So let me say that when technique is taught, not with the paradigms, forget them, it's the teachers who are teaching now, the 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th and 10th hand teachers. What's happening is that when they teach technique, they don't teach, they teach combinations. They don't teach quality, they don't teach feeling, and as you they teach architectural or release, you know. They teach you constantly pulling to the floor. Nobody jumps like, oh, you know, an arm is lifting a curve, you could die to see a curve. I mean, I'm not funny. I mean, I'm funny, but that's it, a curve, a sense of a curve.
Maybe
I mean, it's just the way the teachers teach in general are not qualitative, and they don't exude from the student sensation.
I mean, maybe we can use this kind of with the question that was brought up about this word technique, and not just the word technique, but I'm just trying. I mean, and I'm probably preaching to the converted all around by saying that there's not a singular technique that we're looking at, and not a singular idea of what virtuosity or mastery is, but there are practices, like we're reframing it. Sarah Rudner reframed it that way, and at first I was very skeptical, and now I just fully embrace it to call these classes practice classes, and usually practices, ballet practices, contemporary practices, West African practices, you know, just like to always keep that going. But then there is that question, like, I mean, I see this too, that I actually come from that, and that has given me some power in the world, in a sense, because I've been able to participate a lot, because some of what I do does participate in what the prevailing structures, institutions value, you know, and I've learned to value it too.
But I guess I'm also saying putting in the time, so it's hours a day of being
Right, so there's the
physical.
idea of rigor.
But I just wanted to say, I don't think what Simon is saying is like, let's just pick up somebody from the street who's never practiced.
I
mean,
actually agree with
yeah, that they're self-taught or, no, I'm just saying the self-taught or the autodidactic.
No, I said they put together a program themselves. I mean, presumably they went to study.
Well, or they
Something
practice at
that
home or something.
Interested them or practice for hours,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so there is a practice. It's just not at the bar or not perhaps a Nikolai class. It's a different
We
kind
don't
of
have
practice.
a Nikolai class, we have a theory. We don't have a technique,
Or a theory of Nikolai.
which is space, time, shape, motion, and dynamics.
Right,
which
so
is
maybe
universal.
that person training is not training on those notions.
Well, that's
but
what
they're-
they're not.
Yeah, so they're training, I'm just saying it's a training, but it's not that.
Can we sort of, I would love to get as many voices out there, so if you can do it, condense your thoughts and shoot some of them out there.
Also, just a reminder that elevator will close at 8.
Yep.
If you want.
We're going to be here till 8 in the morning.
So, Stacy, and then I don't know.
I just am wondering, this just occurred to me like 5 minutes ago. Can there, this is for you guys to, I'm curious your answers. Could there be a university dance program that has, that maybe teaches ballet as like a side dish? And teaches modern dance as a as a side dish also? And like just only side dishes? And
Tapas.
tapas.
Tapas dance program. Yeah,
Or-
tapas meal.
And could there be one that oh, this one just like doesn't have ballet at all, so.
We really considered that. I have to tell you, I mean, when we had this opportunity to rethink the practice curriculum, and it was like, so, I mean, besides the fear that some students would revolt, and interestingly, we added about a ballet class, and then it turned out that they didn't enroll in it. Like they said they wanted it, but then faced with all of the opportunity, all of the tapas on the smorgasbord, they didn't actually enroll in that. We don't have more ballet now, but I guess, I mean, what Danielle and I got down to was trying to think, I mean, this is like right now, for this current cultural moment in this current, we kind of went into like thinking two ways. Like we wanted to make sure there was some dance that worked on, I guess, the form and function thing. So form, like some sense of shape, because that is something that is an entry point for a lot of people, and then some practices that dealt with function, with the somatic practices as a good example of that, but that go from that starting point, and that's where we went. So we have this tapas of that, like a lot of different, some classes that deal with form and some classes that deal with function. I'm not sure, the trouble with the tapas is then they don't have one faculty member that they've been with for every year. Like that starts to seem like, oh, that's a value. Like that could be really valuable for a student. And then they also, I don't know, but there's
That's like the
they don't seem to go so
breadth
deep into
versus
it.
depth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I also
Right.
find
Right.
we've been talking about that in movement research faculty meetings, that a lot of dancers aren't going to class now. A lot of dancers are doing a yoga practice and working at home and in their apartment, and there might be some kind of a change going on there.
That's been true for
But
30
is that-
years.
Okay.
But is that financial?
Can we keep going?
Okay, sorry.
But
Good. Didn't mean
can I
to-
just-
Oh, no, I just didn't.
Just responding to that, I mean, zooming out from an American context, there are programs in academic institutions around the world that don't teach ballet at all. So that might surprise you, but I mean, the whole point is you're talking about very Western-defined canons of practice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question
And
was.
the issue is that we feel they are the way to dance proficiency. If you look around the world, it's clearly not. So, we're reliant on our own kind of narrow cultural frameworks. And I think the issue here is in the US, that the population is changing rapidly. By 2043 or whatever it is, there won't be a cultural majority anymore. We need to really embrace what it is that we feel we are teaching as some kind of cultural framework in which people are then going to work out in the world with this form. And it needs to relate. There needs to be a connection between the people you're working with and the aesthetics and the forms you're working with. And that's something we fundamentally need to address now, not when it gets to 2042.
Yeah, I guess I was just really I was just kind of wondering, because for some reason I imagine a Wizard of Oz, person who says no, you cannot have a program that doesn't offer ballet in the United States if you're a university.
There is no person
There
like
are.
that.
I went to a university that didn't offer ballet, but it doesn't solve the problem
No.
because then
It's just
it
one
offers
form.
other courses.
Yeah.
I mean, it's imagining that dance is a physical practice, and it's a physical practice plus your creative approach to applying that practice in the context in which you're working. That's what a dance program is. So, at Arizona, we shifted it completely so that creative practice was the heart, and people were doing different forms, and one of which was a somatic experience class. So it was not a form as such, but about really understanding how your body works. And they would bring those different forms together in the creative practice class. So you had a diversity already of approaches of thinking, of ways of moving. And that the heart of the course was creative practice. So the application of your language, not the learning of the language.
Yeah, Hampshire College has no ballet, but everything's modern based.
Yeah,
I mean,
or,
so it's
or
still
semester.
Western.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, it still
Western.
doesn't address the concern of actual, like, thinking, not just what am I learning, but how am I learning it.
Right.
And why?
And, you know, I just quickly, the rotation, having different teachers come in, rotating in Finland at the University of Helsinki, they have a different faculty in their MA program every 2 weeks or every week. So they don't have that same, but they do for their practice, which is their modern class. But, so, you know, what about that rotation? I think that's an interesting access also for artists out there that want to be teaching. So, sorry, I just wanted to.
What I have found, Patty, what you say is true, that the kids where I teach, very smart kids, but they're really interested in those TV programs, how they dance, and that's what they sit around and talk about. And so they're feeding their body, they're looking up, they're thinking all these things, but they're really interested. I get you with the
Yeah, true. You know, I had a.
I find it shocking.
But I think, you know, the trick is, for example, I was teaching composition last semester at Princeton, and the students were doing Pam Tanowitz and Bill T. Jones, and they were doing famous choreographers, and they were at Cunningham, and they were like, not all of them, and again, please turn off your recording.
You're
But they were like, please get me out of the, I hate everything, you know, because they wanted to do, I want to come in and lead. And so I'm not going to say, what I trained for 10 years, why can't I just stretch my life? And I would say, well, what if? So it's like how we can not say no to the league, but maybe start talking, because they, you know, when I show Trio Wave, they say, I got to get out of this, is the worst course I've ever taken. Nobody can dance here, I hate this stuff. So it's not, it's really how to transform the structure. I think this idea of having maybe many classes going on at the same time, where there isn't a kind of privileging of this idea of virtuosic, but maybe you show that if they want to do that stuff. But then there is a class where you only walk, or you only walk and lie down, I don't know, that there's two things they can do. But that we start thinking about the body not as the sort of source of only how I can do better than you is what is valued. And if I can't be better than you, or if my physical skills are not better than, then I'm not a dancer. How many people here have heard the students say, oh, I'm not a dancer, I can't, I don't know, whatever, I can't do a leap, or I can't do Grand Plié, or I can't do, you know, that we have internalized. So how do we shift all of that?
I think this
Maybe suggestion.
relates to a prevalent contemporary concept of thinking about choreography as an expanded concept, and wondering how we are privileging this relationship between dance and choreography, and wondering if there's ways in which programs can sort of think choreography different, and how that relates to these more interdisciplinary approaches.
Yeah, how do we teach choreography?
Well, I mean,
How do you teach composition?
Firstly, think of what those two terms define,
Yeah.
and they're incredibly narrow. So you abandon them,
Yeah.
and you start to talk about creative practice.
Yeah.
So that's the application of the
Yeah.
knowledge, skills, and your understanding of the world through your physical skills. And then you start to open up, you know, the creative possibilities of each individual student.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't then privilege one way of articulating forms in
Yeah.
space. You think, how am I applying the ways in which I'm thinking about this idea in this multiplicity context, working with other artists. But we need, you know, someone will maybe end up creating movement in space, that's fine.
Right.
But we can't assume that's the paradigm to which we're all aspiring.
I wonder about this in relation to like music and visual art departments, because I felt very hamstrung coming out of, I had done a conservatory in high school and then went to a liberal arts program, and it was incredibly good at getting non-dancers into the programs. And it was very rich in a utopia that I wanted to make dances for always, but there was just this sense of anyone can be a dancer. How great But also, I was working with music. Music can be anything, but these guys had a lot more skills and a lot more history. So I wonder if a music department would define their composition program also as creative practice, or if it, you know, well, it's the elevator time. And I think, yeah, we will. But I'm wondering if this crisis is happening in other artistic fields.
On my way, and I thought, you know what, I need to find out if other fields have the similar conversations, because I feel like we've been having this, and I thought it has to be happening.
Well,
How can it not?
to some extent, I think we have less disciplinary
So we
knowledge.
have, the audience questions.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions.
Well, I did make a no?
Yes.
I just made a promise over here.
No, I'll come back. 'cause
Okay,
I
go ahead, Dave.
kind of talked about it.
Well, in relation to that question, in terms of other art forms,
Yeah.
I've asked that question to art teachers and music teachers, and I get the sense that they are not asking the same questions we are.
Right.
I think we're at the forefront of some of that questioning, and I use the word forefront a little judiciously because it's complicated out there, you know, and it may not feel like we're making much progress because we're asking so many good questions. And the other art forms that I've spoken with, they have a literate tradition of training that's been around much longer than ours has. It's also literate, meaning that words have been applied to it. In music theory, there's a 1/4, there's a 5/4, and there's a 6/4 chord, and there's a, you know, Picardy thirds, and all sorts of strange things that they can put names on them. Because they've had for many years a literate form that they can look at outside of the practice.
Well, and I've found I've had to go to music theory and visual art history in thinking about the concepts that surround my work, to have language for that, and very much feel like it's been hard to locate in my dance education.
Sure. I'm just trying to think of like where that comes from, and I'm thinking that when you start off dancing back when you're little, it's never really an emphasis on creating, where if you start off with music, it's always starting off with creating. Is it not?
No.
It's not, you're right.
You learn how to play an instrument.
But I feel like there's more emphasis in creating. When you start learning music, there's like, you know, you start like playing around, making your own things, whereas in dancing, it's like you're performing. And I don't know.
I had a lot more freedom of doing dances right
But I
there
think,
than
yeah, I
did.
think you're training, some people have creative movement before they have a class that has a form to it, and some people might have creative music before they have the scales or whatever, you know. But
yeah, I think like my question more is, I guess that was not right, but that until you start thinking about creating something, it's not really, like none of those things are ever really relevant, I think. You know, if you don't question like, oh, where does this come from? What is it doing? Why do I need this? Where, like, I don't know. It's just that when you're performing it, that becomes your focus. It's like, how can I kick my leg this high? And, you know, it's about like presentation. I don't know. I don't think, like, me personally, when I just starting to think of choreography was the only time I ever started thinking of really like, well, what does this mean to do this? What is it?
I just think one thing, because the panel seems to be focused on higher education in dance,
Right.
just the way that it's kind of developed came out of a homogenous place, and now we're starting to get to questions of how do we diversify, which is really great. But being a culture that tends to jump on a trend bandwagon, I think it's important that maybe some diversity shakes down within the certainly, like, concert dance isn't going to completely disappear. Maybe it'll like translate itself into another form on film, or there will always certainly be opportunities for dancers who have great skill to be showcased somewhere. But then there's also this trend in our culture that has a big push for creative thinking and cross-disciplinary solutions to things. So how does then, as a thinking more like globally, how are things situated? I don't think you want to get rid of a department that is teaching to high technical level, but then you don't everyone want to go to this other model either. because then something else gets lost. So
I
I
just- I mean,
think
I
it's
just
something
wanna-
within the field as a whole that it's like, what are we doing and how can we retain some of what's there, but then shape down
There
to.
are
I
places.
just want to point everybody to the interview with Jan at the University of Illinois, because this particular idea that she's talking about, which is the community as curriculum, is saying that what's really exciting and is happening is that it's been a pretty homogeneous blueprint, since the 50s of how dance is taught in colleges. And that one of the things that she's seeing is that schools are starting to identify that maybe they deal with a particular population, and they can really create a specific program that's relevant to that population, and so that there can be the one that has lots of ballet, and there can be one that's it's not to happen, but maybe someday, that's like the popping and locking program, and you pull that apart, so there is, I think, some of that starting to happen with that recognition that each program should have its own unique aspects, and I think that's happening from the evolving faculty too, as the doors open to who gets to be a college faculty member, then the programs and the departments in the field can change. That's a major aspect, is who gets to be a teacher at college.
And as we start thinking in this new way, that what is, when you start teaching choreography, that you think about performance making, or what was the word you used? Practice, creative practice, that we have a space for that, and perhaps that there is more levels of things, and that we start teaching creative practice together with an idea of technique, that it's not after you've done 2 years of technique and you can take composition. I don't understand why you do the solo form before you do the group. These things, so perhaps we can do another way of thinking, that learning how to is also learning how to make, and
The traditional structure is kind of irrelevant.
yeah, so that these separations of the thinker, the maker, the teacher is erased by sort of, in the classroom, you are inspired, I don't know what the word would be, to be all those things at once.
It might go back to the teacher practitioner model, and then bringing a lot of them in, like many, not one row, but like lots of different points of view, expose the students to lots of teacher practitioners with really different approaches, and I know you want to tie this up.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's two more.
There are. We have to go get them. Can we make them quick? One and then.
Well, one of the things I wanted to throw into this is, I mean, we clearly as a culture are in a massive transition, the digital transition, that is as big to our culture as the Industrial Revolution was. So that is something that I think that we're feeling repercussions in, when you talk about how we experience dance. And certainly with so many people, you can participate in dance that's happening around the world through the screen. At the same time, then you want to go around the corner and participate in something physical with a small number of actual human beings, not virtual ones. So that, I think, is one of the big trends for dance, that you're all where many of you are looking at saying, well, how do we adjust to that? And as the multiplicity of voices come up, one of the things that I'm hearing is, well, some of us think that more is better. Let's expose our students to more options, more ways. And some of us think, let's just do a course in popping and locking for poppers and lockers, But whichever way, and I think there's room for both, I mean, we have UCLA Department of World Arts and Culture, that's huge. And we have Sarah Lawrence, that's pretty small, I think what I'm hearing and what I came in here, I guess, believing, and I'm affirmed of that belief, is that whatever the department, however it shapes itself, it has to have a theoretical basis that the entire faculty can sign on to. And that in their own way. And that theoretical basis then informs the practices.
Yeah, what kind of utopianism is that?
Well, you're creating one in Arizona.
No, I'm joking.
And not only that it's a theoretical basis that informs how you devise the practices, but that it also has these ways of how's it going to go out from there. Whether it's a small little popping and locking, we're going to teach that to old people because we think that's the best thing for them to do for their health. God forbid. But, okay, whatever, that you're going to go from theory to practice to doing.
But for me, the issue, is not doing more and more to make sure they have every experience.
Well, some people have said that.
But that's not physically possible.
I agree.
What is possible is that you build in a contextualization of everything the students are doing, so they're able to understand where that comes from and why, and then apply it to their own experience. So it's about reflection and contextualizing. And then actually you can give them, as long as you have a broad range of experiences, it actually doesn't matter what the thing is because they'll be getting the same learning experience from it and they'll find their own way to work physically with that. But
That's utopian.
Sorry?
That's utopian and I like the way it sounds, so you'll see if it works.
Arizonans.
I know, you got your first graduates coming.
One more? I never thought I would be making a comment on So You Think You Can Dance, and even I think you can dance, but I just had this sort of bomb dropped on me, or an explosion in my head, which was that I'm sort of obsessed with the notion of accessibility and opening up conversations about dance with people that don't consider themselves to be dance audiences or dance consumers, and I realized that because after hearing so many times, I can't dance, I don't know how to dance, I have 2 left feet, whatever, I don't get dance, I don't like dance, I'm confused by dance. And So You Think You Can Dance in the title linguistically is predicated on the notion that nobody can dance except for these few people. So then if we come, really, even the people that get on the show that think that they can dance actually can't because they don't. I was like, oh my God. So I think then bringing it back to the university, I think I all of a sudden become incredibly excited at this sort of situation that we find ourselves in where if you're working at this juncture between kind of high school going home and watching these programs after TV and then college and kind of thinking for yourself or whatever, sort of opening you're doing in college and then you will continue to do for the rest of your life, you're holding this space of inviting people in from different disciplines and opening up conversations, but then I think the way that it can work best is if the people holding that space are using their history and their technique and their experience and their awareness and their sensitivity to say, this is what I can offer, but I see that you're interested in this. How can I use my resources to learn more about what you're doing so that I can better help you to do what you want to do? And then everyone dance, I guess.
Wow. That can happen in a creative practice. There is, I think that sometimes starts to happen in creative, if it's framed in that way.
But I think it takes a true responsibility on the part of the people in the so-called educator role to stay educated and to allow themselves to be educated by students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Word.
And I can just comment, I'm in my 5th year. I've been teaching at the university for 8 years, but I'm in my 5th year of this tenure track business. And the only way I can be there is because my students are teaching me so much every day. And my practice, the only reason I'm there is because my practice, I needed a location to have my practice. I'm terrible at organizing myself out in the world with all the chaos. I just needed a place. So the only way it can continue and the only way I'll stay there is if I'm learning from my students, which I am. And I love that the students, we have the answer through them if they have space to, express and dream. And so our students tell us what they want. We're up in Western New York, so there's a little less pressure, and we give it to them. It's a little bit weird because it's not New York City. New York City's got very different sort of pulses on it. So.
And final.
I just wanted to offer up my experience, which is just because I'm a little strange in that I came to dance late, in my college years, and I went to Maura. So I have a degree in English, but I first really got exposure to dance in that context. And then during that entire time, which was the early 90s, nobody ever said to go to movement research or DTW back in the day. It was very much of a certain tradition and mindset. And now that's changed, but I think for the time being, back then, somebody did say, hey, go to movement research, and I did. And I had that really autodidactic sort of experience of, completely arbitrary. I'll try Neil Greenberg's class, I'll try